welcome to episode 225 of Cinematary. I'm your host, Zach Dennis, and I'm here with
Andrew Swafford,
Nathan Smith.
And in today's episode, we will be doing movies that we saw this week in part 1. And in part 2, we will be doing our first listener's choice out of our 3 weeks. We have got suggestions from the listeners. Our first one is going to be 1976's Marathon Man. And we'll talk a little bit about the suggestion, who suggested it, and all that good stuff in part 2. But let's go ahead and jump into movies that we saw this week. And Andrew and Nathan, I'm going to kick off with you guys. You watched a documentary that is on Hulu that I've seen on a lot of best of the year lists.
Yeah, Nathan, you want to intro this one?
Yeah, sure. So this is a Hulu original documentary, which means
as you can see in the bottom right-hand corner the entire time you're watching the movie, which
available, which means it's available exclusively on Hulu. Yeah.
Does it really have that?
It has a watermark, yeah.
That's crazy.
So this is a documentary about 90 minutes long called Minding the Gap, directed by Bing Liu, who this is his debut feature film. And it's about his hometown of Rockford, Illinois, a town that's been hit really seems like harder than almost anywhere else maybe in the entire country, just by unemployment and economic woes, and it's also a town that has a problem with violent crime, and particularly a big domestic violence problem. So it's about being in two of his childhood adolescent friends, who all met and bonded through skateboarding. All three of them sort of grew up in difficult households and experienced kind of emotional and physical abuse. And skateboarding became an escape for them and a way out. And so it's basically sort of about that, and about the problems that they're facing in their lives, and their kind of attempts, to take responsibility, kind of learn to be an adult, to sort of, and about halfway through the movie, it's still that, but it becomes a different movie, and it goes on a path kind of slightly different than I was expecting, where it becomes not only about these three boys learning to exist in the world in like a functional way. It's also about them learning to like talk about their feelings, and also about learning, how to reckon with the fact that one of your friends is an abuser. And that just was something that cut very deep for me in a way that I wasn't anticipating when I started this movie. Just thinking about people I've known in my life, and friendships I've had with men, where I then sort of realized that, this is a person who does things that I maybe didn't realize at first. And that's a situation where, you have to kind of make a choice and make a decision and figure out, are you going to talk to this person? Are you going to immediately distance yourself? What are you going to do? And it's a situation where many men, I feel like most men are not socialized to recognize that and to deal with that. Most men still kind of push those things under the rug, defend their friends, or don't say anything about it at all, and just kind of continue with their lives. But this is a movie about acknowledging that, and confronting that, and also about just kind of in a world where men are still not really socialized to work through their feelings and their trauma. This is a movie that's very much about that. It starts off in a way where I was at first I thought, oh, this is just going to be this simple sort of documentary or whatever about this guy and his friends, but it takes on an emotional complexity, and really sort of tackles all of these different issues. It talks about race and class and gender and all these different things. It's sort of advertised as being about three young men, but the sort of on again, off again partner of one of the boys, Zach, and also the mother of his child. Her name's Nina, and she plays a very big part in the documentary too. And that's how, kind of adds a complexity also to the movie that I wasn't expecting, where you sort of see the consequences of some of this behavior and some of and through like her experiences. So yeah, I don't know, Andrew, do you have anything to add? I feel like I've been...
I mean, I co-sign everything you said here. I was really surprisingly blown away by this doc. And to go back to the point that you made about the way in which the movie focuses on men confronting their own issues and confronting issues between each other, I appreciated the way that the movie like situates itself in time too, and how long it takes for these things to be confronted. I think that the documentary probably spans maybe 5 years or something of these guys' lives, but the way that it's edited together and the way that it uses ellipses and things like that really makes it feel like it's moving at the speed of life, and putting you in this uncomfortable position of, being in a moment with someone, like mundane everyday moment with someone, and knowing that you need to confront them about some way in which you disapprove of them or they disapprove of you, and that being really it feels impossible with the way that male friendships are coded, and especially, I don't know, I feel like we're currently kind of ill-equipped to deal with like really problematic behavior within people we have like actual relationships with. We're currently there was that Hannah Gatsby thing that the speech that she came out with a couple of days ago. She was talking about quote unquote good men that she referred to as Jimmy, and then all the other men who are also are possibly problematic that she calls friends of Jimmy, and like Jimmy is okay with like calling out the obviously bad men, but not so good at calling out the people that are within Jimmy's own circle, who have things to deal with, or things they need to be made accountable for. And I think that just the way that this movie lets you see that play out in real time is an opportunity that I don't think I've gotten from cinema before. This is a documentary that kind of figures out what it wants to be as it's playing out. I mean, it stops being a skateboarding doc really fast, and then it just kind of becomes this friendship, this artifact of these guys' friendship, and the way that it progresses into deeper territory just feels really organic and really powerful. I also think that it's incredibly well shot. I mean, this guy's been shooting skateboard videos since he was a really little kid.
He was
as
also,
you can see from
apparently a camera operator on Jupiter Ascending. I learned
he's
recently.
a camera operator on a lot of things, actually.
Yeah.
This is his directorial debut, but he's been a crew member on a lot of films recently. And I mean, you get footage that he took as a elementary schooler, spliced into montages with things that are happening in the present day. And the way in which he can film someone, moving very rapidly through an urban area on a skateboard, I actually am not quite sure how he got that footage. Like, surely he himself is not on a skateboard with a camera. It just feels like it's moving so fluidly, almost in like a Terrence Malick movie, like Emmanuel Lubezki's cinematography style. He's just like floating and following these people incredibly fast.
And like, not to mention that these guys are like very good at skateboarding.
They are.
And they're just like seamlessly, like sailing through the air and like, you know, doing all this crazy stuff that I don't know the names of. And so it's just like, as just like performance capture, it's very thrilling to watch.
So this is a doc that I feel like if every documentary was like this, I might be somewhat resentful toward the way that it's put together. But because I don't feel like I've ever seen a doc quite like this, it feels like kind of a revelation. I don't know. Maybe I'm just underseen on documentaries and this is derivative, but I was really, really, really impressed by it.
Yeah, I think that I'm normally, you know, when it comes around to like year-end catch-up, I think documentaries sometimes are sort of a lower priority for me. So I was not expecting to be affected by this like I was. So I think it, you know, is something that appeals to both probably more hardcore documentary fans and people who are maybe more casual documentary fans. It's like raw and intense, but I think it's also very watchable and has those like, you know, sort of moments of ecstasy in the skateboarding sequences. So it's just a very emotional and engaging experience, I think, kind of across the board.
Jonah Hill is crying in his room right now.
I know. You know.
Andrew, you had another movie you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, I wanted to give a brief plug for Never Goin Back, a small stoner comedy that came out this year, distributed by A24. It's directed by Augustine Frizzell. This is her directorial debut, and she has some connections. Her husband is David Lowery, director of A Ghost Story and Old Man and the Gun, and the film is somewhat autobiographical, I've learned from doing some digging on her. It focuses on two friends who she wrote as lovers, but you don't really see much in the way of like love scenes in the movie. You really just experience their friendship. Who are, I think, 15 or 16, have clearly dropped out of high school somehow. They're truant or something. They're working as waitresses, scraping together money for rent, living with the brother of one of these girls. And the conflict of the movie is established very, very early on. They want to go to the beach. They just want to buy a modest little, beachfront cabin or whatever you want to call it in Texas. I think it's in Texas. I could be wrong about that. I'm fairly sure it's Texas. Galveston, Texas. And the conflict of the movie, the stakes and the plot points that this thing goes through are very small scale, but they feel like they have this, incredibly stressful and larger than life weight to them while you're going through the movie. It is kind of like if you took the plot of Spring Breakers, or like the first act of Spring Breakers, and you injected it with the economic reality of like Wendy and Lucy or something like that. There seems to be a financial dimension to every single decision that is made in this movie, even if it's just having to stop at the laundromat on the way to your shift because you got beer spilled on it or something like that. It is a very freewheeling a movie that feels like maybe a lot of it was ad-libbed in the first half. And I was a little let down by where it ends up going in the third act because it ends up being very like Chekhov's everything. All the things that showed up in the first section of the movie end up circling back around in the last half and linking up in ways that felt a little unrealistic and not true to the spirit of the movie that it had set up. But I still was really charmed by this movie. It made me laugh out loud alone at home multiple times. And I think it's really smartly put together in terms of how like socially aware it is. Like it takes this, these characters who could so easily be the subject of mockery and humor, as they often are throughout the film, but also makes you see them as like real agents in this economic system that's not designed for them. I'd be very curious to hear what you think about this movie, Nathan. A, for like the Marxist angle on it, but also B, because it has a lot of like gross out body humor in the last section that I know that you're a fan of from the like Jackass films and Adam Sandler's filmography and stuff like that. So this is kind of a small film that I was surprised and charmed by that I would recommend people checking out.
Cool stuff. And I believe if you have Canopy, you can watch it.
Yeah, you watch for free on Canopy and on Amazon Prime as well.
There you go. And then real quick...
But do it on Canopy, you know?
Yeah, do it on Canopy.
Yeah, you should.
Then real quickly, give a quick plug for Bumblebee, which you wrote about for the website.
I did write a review of Bumblebee for the website. Been very hyped by this movie for most of the year, mostly because I'm a huge fan of its star, Haley Steinfeld, both as an actor and as a pop star. I think she's one of the best pop stars we have right now. She's not in enough movies because she's a very busy person trying to juggle two careers at the same time. And I think that she's incredibly good in this movie. It's a film that is competently puts together in a way that I think you could accuse Michael Bay's movies of not being, and to the point that it's maybe a little derivative and not necessarily compelling in its own right. But I think that the charisma that Steinfeld brings to the performance really elevates the material, and it's interesting to see a new take on this franchise. I went a lot deeper into it on the review on the website that I recommend checking out. The TLDR version of my review is summed up pretty well by a tweet by Lindsay Ellis, who has a long YouTube series about the Michael Bay's Transformers franchise. She said, "It's derivative but competent and highly enjoyable. The tone is consistent and it has a high degree of sincerity and is actually appropriate for children. It is a solid B+." I completely agree with that tweet, and I think that you can get into the details of how and why if you go read my review. There's also some stuff in there about financing and economics of this film, specifically how they relate to Laika Studios, because the director of this is Travis Knight, creative director and CEO of Laika, director of Kubo and the Two Strings. It is very possible that this movie's existence is keeping Laika afloat. So if you have a vested interest in that company, maybe you should check this out just to throw them your dollars. But go read the review on cinematary.com.
Definitely. So I'm trying to play 2018 catch up, and one of those that I caught up with this past week is The Other Side of the Wind, which is the 40 years in the making last film of Orson Welles that was put together on Netflix. I also watched They'll Love Me When I'm Dead, which is the Morgan Neville documentary about the process of putting this back together, as well as the last 15 years of Orson Welles' life as he was trying to get this film made. Quickly on Other Side of the Wind, the movie is about the final day of Jack Hannaford, who is played by John Huston. He is this grizzled old director who was the kind of wonderkin genius early on in his career in Hollywood, and is now attempting to kind of remind the Hollywood people that he is still here and can make evocative, innovative movies, which, as many people allude to in the documentary, is what they assumed Orson Welles was kind of doing with this movie. At times he floundered with and kind of was like, I might play this role, but ended up doing what he said his first choice was, and letting John Huston play it. Oya Koder, who people mostly remember from F is Fake, stars a lot of her stars as this actress who you see a lot of butt from, a lot of nudity. I like Willa McClay's review where she says, Orson Welles, I'm going to make a movie about Oya's ass. It will be my greatest achievement. My God, I love this woman's ass. And I was just laughing about that while watching this movie because it's kind of like that. There's scenes where she's just walking and he's very impressed by that. Pretty much the crux of this is Hannaford is making this movie also called Other Side of the Wind. They're heading back to his house outside of Hollywood where they're going to have a screening of the movie as well as celebrate his 70th birthday. You have all these intersecting parties. Among them is this young up-and-coming filmmaker played by Peter Bogdanovich. Again, supposed to kind of be Peter Bogdanovich at that period in time. And I guess I could try to explain a lot of the other stuff happening, but this is a movie that's very difficult to explain. There's a lot of stuff happening all at once. It was one of those where it took me, this is about a 2-hour long movie, and it took me about 45 minutes to kind of grasp the rails and be somewhat on board with what was going on. It's tough to really make of what this is. I know a lot of people have just been completely awestruck by this. I kind of desperately wanted to like it more. I think that it kind of has that clout where it's just like this. It's this lost movie that Orson Welles wanted to be made, and it's supposed to be radical and elusive and misunderstood, and it carries a lot of those elements throughout. The editing is a lot. It'd be interesting to see what this would have looked like if Welles had edited the whole thing. I believe, and Nathan, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe Welles edited the movie within the movie, but he did not edit
most of the movie within the movie.
Yeah, but he did not edit any of the actual movie itself with the John Huston, Peter Bogdanovich storyline. And to me, that kind of takes away from what this could have been, because a lot of the documentary is them talking about how nobody, including the people in the movie, really understood what this movie was about. Like, they didn't understand what was going on in this thing, because a lot of it, there was no like script written down, there was nothing concrete in it. It was all in Orson's head. And so to kind of feel like this is put together as like this duty of his feels just kind of weird and not really disingenuous, but just misguided. I'm sure that he had outlines and had stuff to kind of give them a direction of what he would want, but it feels weird to have all the parts of this movie by this director who I feel like is very well known for having a very singular vision for what he wants out of his movie, and to have them kind of put it together and then say this is a thing directed by Orson Welles is a little jarring. It's also jarring to have Netflix presents an Orson Welles picture. That's a whole weird statement that I don't think many people thought would happen. But Other Side of the Wind, I guess, I think I would like to come back to it. I'll say that I'm not incredibly well versed on Orson Welles' filmography outside of like Citizen Kane and some of his roles that he starred in that weren't his directing. So I think I might go back and work my way through a lot of his films and then come back to this and see if I gain any more appreciation. I was kind of cold on it after watching it, and then appreciated it a little bit more after watching the documentary, just hearing Orson Welles talk about it and Peter Bogdanovich reflect on it. But for the most part, I think this one kind of went past me, and I'm not really totally sure what to do with it. I feel weird. I feel a little left out because I feel like I'm supposed to appreciate this, but I'm kind of just, not sure what to do with it. But it's on Netflix. Both this and the documentary They'll Love Me When I'm Dead are both on Netflix if you would like to check it out. Other Side of the Wind. Nathan, you had a movie you want to talk about?
Yeah, another 2018 release that I caught up with this week is the remake of Superfly, directed by Director X, a prominent mostly hip-hop music video director whose career spans 2 decades. You might know him for his work on such music videos as Yeah by Usher, The New Workout Plan by Kanye West, probably most famously Hotline Bling by Drake, and most recently God's Plan. So, you know, this is a remake of the movie of the same name with Ron O'Neal, the blaxploitation movie, you know, a really iconic film from the 70s. And this is filtered through the aesthetic that I'm sure you sort of are maybe familiar with if you've seen any of those music videos, you know. You have a lot of like bright neon lighting. You know, you have a lot of kind of rap video tropes, a lot of bottles being popped, a lot of mansions and money and furs and fast cars and all those good things. I had really wanted to see this movie in theaters, but I just didn't get around to it because it's just one of those things. I had fun with it for a number of reasons. Mostly because it's just like a very detailed movie and a very specific movie and sort of weird in a lot of the details that are included in it. Unlike the original film, which is set in Harlem, this is set in Atlanta. It's also executive produced by Future, who is executive producing the soundtrack, which is this like very like chill rap R&B kind of soulful, you know, trap soul kind of thing.
A little too quiet in the mix throughout the movie, though, I have to say.
Yeah, it's a little sort of sleepy. And other than that, the like music is a lot of wailing sort of 80s guitars, which I was not expecting, and some sort of like ambient synth tones. So it really feels like it's trying to go for like a motion smoothed Michael Mann kind of thing, but maybe cheaper and more sort of direct to video vibes. But as an Atlanta movie, I feel like it's very refreshing. Just since so many movies are shot in Atlanta now, you know, it's like all the big movies are at least in some way, you know, produced there. And, you know, there's Baby Driver tried to like actually be set in Atlanta, but that just felt really artificial to me. And this is like very, you know, detailed and has like the Claremont Lounge and like all these different places and in it. And so it's, you know, very sort of aware of its setting. You have a really amazing cameo in Big Boy playing the mayor of Atlanta. Like, he's just great in it, and I think that's perfect casting. You also have cameos from Zaytoven and Rick Ross and Lecrae. It also is like funnier than I was anticipating it being. Youngblood Priest, the main character, you know, is this hustler trying to get out of the game, but he wants to do like one big, you know, move of product before he retires. So he like goes above his mentor, played by Michael K. Williams, who's like a karate master. You know, he like goes above him and gets in contact with a Mexican cartel, starts selling tons of product. Of course, things eventually get out of hand. The cops get involved, blah, blah, blah. So he, you know, he's fine. Trevor Jackson is fine, but he has really interesting rapport with his sort of like sidekick turned nemesis, Eddie, played by Jason Mitchell, who's sort of just like joking and riffing throughout the whole thing. And it's like sort of just like, it's not like a lot of times like laugh out loud humor, but it's just like, I was not expecting it to really like, you know, I thought it was going to be a sort of like serious, moody action movie the entire time, but it's actually kind of funny and feels sort of improvised in a nice light way. And there's just a lot of like goofy stuff in it. Like, you know, there's Bitcoin in it. There's this car chase that ends with a car blowing up as it crashes into like a Confederate monument, which, you know, feels is like a cathartic thing to see. You know, at one point, Youngblood gets like dangled out of a plane as a cartel boss threatens to drop him out of a plane. I mean, Director X was a visual consultant on Belly, you know, the soul feature film directed by Hype Williams, the like godfather of the rap music video, and just one of the like most impressive aesthetic, kind of innovators of the last like 2 to 3 decades. Director X was a visual consultant on that movie, and this, sort of seems like in the kind of spirit of Belly, but I think Belly is just such a like much better movie, and this is like nice looking here and there, but a lot of times it just feels like a simulation, and something feels kind of off and like weird and artificial, and like I don't know. It just it's maybe a little too long, and like
it is definitely too long. It has too many conflicts stacked on top of each other, and so they all kind of have to get resolved one by one in the third act.
And there's a lot of plot that I can't follow. And also he's like in a polyamorous relationship with 2 women. So you just have like all these characters, and all these relationships that you have to wrap up by the end. Which, not to like complain that he's in a poly relationship, like that's cool. That's not something I expect from a mainstream, Hollywood movie. But there's just a lot going on, for better and for worse. Also, there are these like 2 cop villains who are like really funny. One of them is played by this actress Jennifer Morrison, who I'm not familiar with, but who kind of seems like Jennifer Jason Leigh a little bit, just this sort of like mouthy, like no bullshit mean lady, and she has this like cop, her like partner. There's this scene where he searches a character's car while rapping Right and Dirty, and it's just like very weird, but the plot is just super boring, and I really don't know what like actually happened in most of this movie, but it looks nice, and it's got some fun stuff, and it's like there were actually a few moments where I was like, this is like a really good movie, but then it just kind of keeps going, and it gets a little undercooked, I guess, as it goes on. So
yeah, that's pretty much how I felt about it too.
Yeah,
cool. But it's, I guess it's on DVD, all that good stuff. Is it streaming anywhere?
I don't think it's streaming, but I'm sure you can rent it on Amazon or whatever. I'm sure. So
we're going to take a short break, and then we will be back talking Marathon Man in part 2 after this.
Hello, Cinematary listeners. This is Andrew Swafford with an important message during this break in the show. Cinematary would like you to know that we do not want your money, and we don't want to place ads in the show at this time. That's not why we do this. We do it because we enjoy each other's company and because we want to bring you our pure, unadulterated opinions on the world of cinema. However, there are a few things you can do to help out the show that we would greatly appreciate. Firstly, leave us a review on iTunes, preferably a positive one, because the algorithm gods tell us that reviews increase our podcast's exposure. Secondly, send us a tweet at Cinematary, or better yet, send an email to cinematary@yahoo.com so that we can hear from you guys for a change. Maybe you think I'm an idiot for not liking Singing in the Rain, or maybe you have a suggestion of a movie that you really want to hear our opinion on. Regardless, let us know your thoughts, and we'll read them out and respond to them on future episodes of Cinematary. Finally, please share the show with friends and members of your family who you think would enjoy listening to and participating in our film discussions we bring to you guys every week. So to recap, review, send us your thoughts through Twitter and email, and share with your friends and family. We would truly appreciate it. Thanks for listening. Now let's get back to the show.
And we are back with part 2 of episode 225 of Cinematary. In this part, we will be doing our first listener's choice selection. And it is going to be 1976's Marathon Man. But before I get into that, I want to talk about the person who asked us to do this movie, which is, as I'm pulling up my email, this is good radio, Cameron Smith. Cameron Smith, he's at Wu-Tang Zombie on Twitter. He said he discovered the podcast, and I'm sorry, but I have to say this because this is what he says, via the illustrious and imitable at Trillmore Girls. So...
yeah, lifetime mutuals, Wu-Tang Zombie and I. Good dude.
So he put this as one of his recommendations. So Cameron, thank you for listening to the show, and thank you for, I guess, complimenting Nathan. So
yeah, thank you for being so nice. Very, very makes me feel good.
Yeah,
I feel bad all the time. So
we'll just have all of these episodes have compliments for you. Marathon Man. It is directed by John Schlesinger from a script by William Goldman, rest in peace, recently, based on the novel of his by the same name. The film stars Dustin Hoffman, Roy Scheider, and Laurence Olivier. And the film is about Thomas Babe Levy, who is a Columbia grad student. I just like that name. It just
credited as Babe in the closing
Babe
credit.
Levy.
I know.
He is a Columbia grad student and long-distance runner who is oblivious to the fact that his older brother Doc is a government agent chasing down a Nazi war criminal. It's something you'd think you'd pick up on at Thanksgiving or something. That is, until Doc is murdered and Babe finds himself knee-deep in a tangle of stolen gems and sadistic madmen. Even his girlfriend Elsa becomes a suspect as everything Babe believed to be true is suddenly turned upside down. Goldman was paid a reported $500,000 for the film rights to his novel and to do a screenplay before the novel had even been published. Another source said $450,000. Quote, the book reads like the movie, let me start over. The book reads like the movie of all time, said producer Robert Evans. I regard it as a cheap investment because you don't often find books that translate into film. This is the best thing I've read since The Godfather. It could go all the way if we don't foul it up in the making.
What is the movie of all time?
It's Marathon Man.
Put the kid in the picture, baby.
Goldman estimated that he did 4 versions of the screenplay and says Robert Towne was brought in at the end to help. Goldman says Schlesinger only agreed to do the film because he had just finished The Day of the Locust and was, quote, terrified he was dead in Hollywood. Laurence Olivier was cast early on. However, he had health issues, and at one stage it was uncertain whether he would be able to do the film. Richard Widmark auditioned for the part, but Olivier eventually recovered and was able to participate. Reportedly, Olivier and Dustin Hoffman did not get along very well during filming. Olivier did not agree with Hoffman's style of method acting, which involved staying up days at a time in order to appear truly out of his mind and in physical pain for the film's famous torture scenes. Quote, my dear boy, Olivier is remembered as saying, why don't you just try acting? The nickname given to Laurence Olivier's character, Der Weißengel, the White Angel, was inspired by Nazi doctor Josef Mengele, known as the Angel of Death, or also Der Weißengel, because when he stood on the platform of arrivals to concentration camps, he looked like a white angel directing victims to their deaths. Marathon Man was the second feature film production in which inventor-operator Garrett Brown used his then-new Steadicam after Bound for Glory. However, it was the first feature using the Steadicam that saw theatrical release, predating the premieres of both Bound for Glory and Rocky by 2 months. This new camera stabilization system was used extensively in Marathon Man's running and chase scenes on the streets of New York City. Schlesinger asked composer Michael Small to make music that matched the theme of, quote, pain and the endurance of pain. Although the first preview of the movie was successful, the second one in San Francisco did not go well. The audience complained about all the violent scenes, so John Schlesinger and editor Jim Clark chose to delete the following scenes and shots. The scene near the beginning of the film in which Doc fights with 2 assassins who have killed his friend, the graphic and gory close-ups of Snell or Zell. That was it. I'm sorry. I'm tired. I'm dealing with.
I'm glad you tripped up. I mean, you were suspiciously good at reading out all these Nazi names.
Oh, so. The German expressionism essay helped me with my German.
Oh, that's right.
So gory close-ups of Zell disemboweling Doc with his wrist blade in both of the torture scenes, which were heavily cut. Graphic inserts shots from the torture scenes, which were filmed by Clark, were removed. Some photos, such as original lobby cards and stills, show Zell torturing Babe longer with dental instruments in the first torture scene, and actual on-screen drilling of Babe's tooth in the second torture scene. Some critics believe
This is the kind of censorship I can get behind. I don't need to see that.
Some critics believe that the violence exhibited was necessary to the film and to the character of Babe. Other critics found the violence to be offensive. Critic Pauline Kael considered the film a, quote, Jewish revenge fantasy. Schlesinger said that Marathon Man was successful not only because it had elements of escapism, but also because the audience easily identified with Babe Levy. Schlesinger said that he, quote, is definitely someone that you can root for. The film is about his survival in a grim and hostile world. In our present age of anxiety, we can all identify with characters who are not trying to get ahead, but simply survive. Variety in 1975 said the film spends literally half of its length getting some basic plot points, fitted and moving, by which time it's asking a lot if anybody still cares why Dustin Hoffman's brother Roy Scheider is a mysterious globetrotter, why Laurence Olivier as an ex-Nazi disguises his appearance to leave a jungle hideaway to go to New York, why U.S. secret agent William Devane seems to in league with Olivier and his goons, Richard Bright and Mark Lawrence, why Martha Keller throws herself at Hoffman, why the memory of Hoffman's dishonored professor father, a victim of the McCarthy era, relates to anything. In 1976, Roger Ebert said, I'm not a purist when it comes to thrillers, and with Marathon Man, that's just as well. If a movie like this is going to work, it has to work moment by moment and scene by scene, and Marathon Man does. There are all sorts of unanswered questions when the film's over, but I'm not inclined to hold that against it. I enjoy thrillers for the people and predicaments in them, not for their clockwork plots. Marathon Man is almost all people and predicaments, or more exactly, one person in his unending series of predicaments. On that note, let's talk a little bit about Marathon Man. And Nathan, I want to start with you and ask: Is this the life of a Columbia grad student?
I don't know, man. Like, this movie started with Dustin Hoffman like running, and I was immediately like, cannot relate to this. This is not my life. You know, we get like one scene of him on campus, and my eyes kind of perked up at that moment. But, you know, then he just goes into a class with three other people and
to get roasted for
and like
3 minutes.
Then talks to a professor and like that's it. And I guess he's working on his thesis, you know. He like yells at them to leave the pages of his thesis alone, but he's, you know, spending all his time like following women into their apartments and you know, like chasing random people who say things to him in Riverside Park and
from the library.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't that like the thing that you were reading, Zach, about like Babe Levy being like easy to root for. I was like, I don't know. This guy is just kind of like a non-entity to me, a little bit. I don't know how you guys felt.
I mean, I feel like he is sort of the polar opposite of Roy Scheider's character, where he's a very determined man who can get what he wants when he wants it. And Dustin Hoffman is almost like a shell of a person. He's maybe this is emphasized by how often he's running, just like sweating all of himself out of himself. I don't know. He seems to be a person who is just running on fumes of his father's memory, and doesn't have much of a sense of self or direction.
Yeah, it's kind of, I can imagine people going to see this movie when it came out and being shocked when Roy Scheider's character dies, just because you were like, oh, well, shit, this was the guy I kind of wanted to watch, like, do stuff the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like, this seems like some, like, you know, almost action hero person who's supposed to be fighting the Nazi war criminal. Instead, I have kind of sad, sloppy Dustin Hoffman, who is running around everywhere and following women into their apartments because, luckily he's clarified that he's never harassed anybody at all. That's just out of the realm of possibility.
Not him.
Yeah, not the guy who...
He's a nice guy.
I think it's Roy Scheider. One thing about him as an actor that is sort of not emphasized enough is that I feel like he was very much a chameleon, because you look at his character here and then compared to like Jaws, in which he plays a sort of more timid guy, and in this movie, he's kind of glamorous, like fighting off an assassin. It feels like having these sort of two disparate personalities anchor the movie. Feels like for the first hour at least, like you're just sort of switching back and forth between two different movies, and it's sort of a weird effect. Actually, I guess three movies really, including if you include the Nazi subplot.
Well, Roy Scheider's character is all wrapped up in the Nazi subplot, I guess. But to go back to the quote that you read out in your intro, Zach, about the first half of the movie just setting up some preliminary plot points. I mean, it's... I don't know if I would go as far as to say that it's only setting up preliminary plot points. I mean, it's a 70s paranoia conspiracy movie, and so it's threading all of these different possible angles through which Dustin Hoffman is maybe going to explore this conspiracy. And I did find it really intriguing and ominous for that first hour, like trying to connect all of these dots, because you really don't have any clue what the connection between Scheider and Hoffman is until Scheider is in Hoffman's bedroom in the middle of the night, and it's like a fake out scare where you think that he's intruding and he's going to kill Dustin Hoffman. All of a sudden it's like a brother buddy movie for a minute until it becomes something much different.
Yeah. Strangely, this movie, and it came out the same year as this one, but this movie kind of reminded me of a movie that Dylan Moore talked about a few weeks back, but Elaine May's Mickey and Nicky, or Mikey and Nike, or whatever you would like to refer to it as.
Mickle and Nickel.
Mikey and Nicky.
Just because it tosses you into this kind of run down, constantly on edge New York of the 70s. I think you get a little bit of that in some of Scorsese's work, but with Marathon Man, it doesn't seem to necessarily lean into the 70s New York aesthetic as much. I mean, it's there, but it feels like it's trying so hard with its preposterous thriller plot that it kind of forgets that it could kind of lean on this style of movie that is provocative all on its own. And I was just kind of like, that's Mikey and Nicky is a movie that leads you through this world of New York that feels like somewhat foreign and constantly dangerous without having to allude to any outside force, even though there are outside forces trying to harm these characters. It's a weird juxtaposition.
This version of New York is like your hometown where you went to high school and you go back and you visit it every now and then, and you're hoping you don't bump into anyone from your childhood. It's like a Nazi can just walk down the street in New York and 5 Jewish people they tortured see them.
They're like, oh, it's that Nazi.
Well, also there are some odd sort of stray scenes that have play an important narrative function in the movie but aren't really directly related to the main plot. Like towards the opening, when the two old guys are chasing each other through the streets and then they crash into a fuel truck and explode and burn to death, and that is what links this New York world to the Nazis, and it's just the most ridiculous coincidence.
And I also feel like it's like what people assume New York is like all the time. Just
People
just
getting
like
stabbed by sleeve knives in the middle of the street.
yeah, Laurence Olivier who's auditioning for an Assassin's Creed game. You know,
Does Laurence Olivier say anything in this movie? He has a silent role, right?
no, he says a lot of stuff.
yeah.
Wait. Did I mistake Laurence Olivier for someone else in this movie?
I think
Which
you
is
did.
Laurence Olivier's character?
Laurence Olivier is Zell. He's the Nazi.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Cut this out. Cut this out. Zach, I'm curious to hear your take on the Nazi stuff. How did this how did you take it?
I feel like this, though, in terms of inserting Nazis into movies, this is a little different than, like, if Marathon Man came out in 2018, it would feel almost a little shoed in. Like, it would feel like a forced, like, we got to have some sort of villain that we can all understand is a villain, so he's a Nazi. But I feel like having it in 1976, you know, not even 50 years, you know, it's less than 50 years removed from World War II and those events, like there's still that freshness of the Holocaust, especially kind of holding over the culture at this point, that it feels plausible to have somebody like this. You know, it seems like a very similar plot, but much more built up than the movie that came out earlier this year with Ben Kingsley and Oscar Isaac called Operation Finale, where they're going to Argentina or whatever to kill this Nazi war criminal. But at least this, like, it feels in congruence with this just kind of cultural sin that's still permeating throughout, you know, it's in a lot of people's mindsets. You know, it doesn't seem as like this shoehorned in, we have to have a bad guy, so let's make him a Nazi type thing.
Yeah, I mean, to be serious about the joke I made earlier about, you know, walking down the street and bumping into somebody you knew from World War II, it is an interesting moment in time for this movie to come out where we're just like one generation removed from the Holocaust, where the people who experienced it are, you know, living normal lives somewhere, if they weren't part of the Nuremberg trials or whatever. So it is an interesting thing to examine the generational, like one generation repercussion of that.
Yeah, and I think it's an interesting movie just like with that premise, because I think sometimes something that gets forgotten is that I mean, even now, you know, it's like we're not even like a century, you know, after the Holocaust, and with everything going on in our world today, you know, I think sometimes people get this idea in their heads that, like, oh, if we, you know, all it's going to take is like a new president and then everything will go away. But it's like certain things are unleashed and out there, and like there are certain people who hold certain views, and like that's not just going to like magically go away. And so I think it's like important to kind of remember, you know, that like World War II was not a like, you know, open and shut book. So I think that like the premise is interesting, but I don't feel like it really totally capitalizes on it. And, you know, Pauline Kael calls it this like Jewish revenge thriller, which I feel like is a sort of undercurrent in the movie, but I don't feel like it's something that it's like actively like engaging with. And I wish that it like engaged with it a little bit more, because I think that would be very rich and interesting.
Well, I think in the third act it very much becomes that. Once Dustin Hoffman, he's escaped once and he has a target. He finds out where this guy is, and he's on the hunt for him. Pauline Kael calls it Death Wish, with a lone Jewish student getting back at the Nazis. And I don't think that I would use Death Wish as the comparison. I think I would use Dirty Harry, specifically because of the way that this movie ends. The final note it goes out on, where he throws the gun into the river, which happens in Dirty Harry, though we have polar opposite characters in terms of how sympathetic these people are to root for. I mean, I know some people root for Clint Eastwood and Dirty Harry, but those people are terrible people. Here, the moral lines could not be more clear in terms of who is in the right and who is in the wrong, but it still ends up being that kind of exploitation revenge movie. And I know that you would like to see it dig into that more. I ultimately worry that form is maybe a dead end for this story, and I don't know what else we could glean from. I mean, what else we can glean is like Inglourious Bastards or something, right?
Yeah, I guess. But
I don't know if how successful or how fruitful that is.
Well, I do think, like, just talking about kind of the violence, I think this movie is very interesting. I don't know if you guys know anything about, like, Dustin Hoffman and guns. Like, have you heard about this at all?
Like, in real life?
In real life.
No. Tell me.
So, he is, like, one of the, like, at least few major Hollywood actors that I know of who has, like, explicitly tried to avoid roles that involve holding a gun. I mean, there are a few exceptions. Like, obviously, this movie is one.
Straw Dogs.
And like Little Big Man, or what is that? I can't remember the exact name of that movie. Little Big Man. But like, apparently there was some incident in the 70s where like this crazy theater producer like pulled a gun on him. And his like thing has basically been like, he's like, you don't know what it, like, most people, like a lot of people don't know what it feels like to have like a gun pointed at you and to like, have to reckon with that. And it like happened to him in the early 60s, like shortly after Kennedy was assassinated. And so it just seems like something that like really sort of affected him and was like a jarring, traumatic moment in his life. So it's just interesting, like,
and like Death Wish and Dirty Harry, this is a movie that wants his gun use to seem really cool. There's even like a proto first person shooter shot where we're kind of seeing from his perspective and his arm is coming out into the frame holding the gun, which made me think of the whole like perspective and identification part of my video essay as well. But sorry, I cut you off.
No. I was just going to say, it's like, he's on the poster for this movie, he's holding a gun. And I think that like Hoffman, like him being cast in this, I mean, of course, it sort of like conjures, like The Graduate, that image of him. And in some ways, like this character is a sort of more extreme version of Benjamin in The Graduate, because Benjamin sort of goes through this like unraveling and this breakdown, and Babe Levy also goes through this kind of like intense paranoid, like almost psychotic breakdown because of everything that happens to him, and like gets a gun and just becomes a totally different sort of like person who is just this like raw force of energy, and he's just like goes through a very like I don't know, like physical, I think, kind of transformation throughout the movie.
Do you feel like that kind of plays into going back to the quote that Schlesinger made about him, this present age of anxiety we can all identify with characters who are not trying to get ahead but simply survive? I guess it's kind of trying to play into that where, he is a character that it doesn't seem like he's trying to necessarily win. Like even that final confrontation with Zell, it doesn't seem like he's like, I gotta win this, this is the big bad and I have to win and walk away, and it's like a very heroic thing. It's just more all of this stuff has happened, and the only way to kind of just clog it up and finish it is to get rid of him. But I mean, does it kind of play into that anxiety-ridden thriller of the 70s?
I mean, I think he definitely wants to humiliate and emasculate this guy. if he just wanted him out of the picture, he would just shoot him with the pistol and walk off, as opposed to making him go through the torment of swallowing that diamond and stuff like that. But I do feel like that, to answer the second part of your question, this feels very akin to some of those 70s paranoia movies. I was thinking of Blowout, actually, because of the way in which this movie uses horror techniques. You know, you have the torture scene, you have this random Asian slasher character who shows up really briefly, who's like hiding behind a curtain, and there's a shot using a mirror that kind of obscures the character. He has piano wire. It feels very much like a movie that is inflected through this kind of sleazy 70s horror aesthetic. I think that it's a movie that's shifting forms so much that it ends up limiting itself by the end, because once it settles into being a revenge movie where the Nazis really just want diamonds, and it's not really an ideological conflict at all, that deflates the import of the story for me a little bit. I don't know. I'm curious what you guys think.
Yeah, I think you alluded to this earlier, saying that the first part of it, especially when Roy Scheider's there, is I don't know, to me it's a little bit more engaging than what it becomes, because it becomes this whole, like, the two parts are kind of running parallel, but at the same time, once Roy Scheider's character dies and it becomes them, you know, kidnapping Dustin Hoffman's character and torturing him and putting him in this large webbed plot, like, it does seem kind of, I don't think that the outline of what this overall plot was supposed to be was very clear by the time Roy Scheider's character died. Like, I think if they outlined that a little bit more and alluded to that and kind of were a little bit more explicit where, like, this is what's in play, I honestly feel like we don't get any clear footing on what's happening in this plot until there's the scene where the guy who you think is working with Roy Scheider saves Dustin Hoffman from the kidnapping and, like, drives him around.
Or pretends to,
and is, like, literally laying out the plot and then takes him back there. Like, that's the only time where we're like, oh, so this is what's happening. Up to that point, it was all so vague, and I wasn't sure how invested I was supposed to be in it. And so that character exists to explain the things that we have been wondering about the whole movie. Yeah, exactly, and to look like a second-rate Warren Beatty. But other than that, that's why he's there. But yeah, that's kind of how I felt. Like, it's just like the first part is interesting, and then that happens, and it's very muddy until I like the whole Olivier Hoffman kind of cat and mouse thing for a while is fun, but for the middle part, I guess, was just kind of laggy to me. I'm wondering, speaking of what the purpose of certain plot elements in this movie are, it's called Marathon Man. He's training for a marathon for most of the movie. He does end up having to be in a serious foot chase in the middle of it. But is there any other significance to the whole marathon aspect of his character? I mean, I know I mentioned earlier, like, he's sweating his identity out or whatever, but I don't know if it necessarily, like, has a payoff on a plot level. Yeah, it's like at the beginning when he's racing that guy, you know, it feels like it's sort of like saying something about his, like, masculinity or whatever. But I just want to point out that when he chases, what's her name, Elsa, out of the library, it cuts from them leaving the gates of Columbia at 116th Street, and her apartment is at, like, 94th. So he chased her for 22 blocks. Running the entire time. How did he not catch up to her before that? I know, but before he catches up, it's not for 22 blocks that he catches up with her. So he was, like, jogging, at a moderate pace behind her, following her for 22 blocks. Like, this guy has some issues. In the opening credits and in the Bigfoot chase near the climax of the movie, I guess not the climax, Act 2, it intercuts it with archival footage of some dude running, I assume, in the Olympics.
Did you guys like catch this? What's going on there?
I think it was the Berlin Olympics. Jesse Owens.
Oh, it's intercutting with Jesse Owens.
That's what I thought it was, because I just sort of like, I knew going in that the movie was about like Nazis, and so I was just kind of like, oh, it's about Nazis. Like, this would make sense for this to be Jesse Owens. But I don't actually.
Why is it Jesse Owens?
I don't know. Maybe it would make sense as this sort of like
it would make
solidarity like against the Nazis.
He has to run like Jesse Owens to beat the Nazis.
Well, I guess I don't know. We know it. I don't know. We know he's Jewish. I was like, oh, this is like
Jesse Owens wasn't Jewish.
I mean, it's one of the only moments in the movie where I felt that a serious formal choice was being made to pull me out of the reality of the film. So it's a meta thing where this character isn't conscious of the fact that he's prepping himself for a race with the Nazis, but he is in this narrative that's been constructed for him where he is going to end up like being an echo of Jesse Owens in some way. Yeah. But again, I don't know if the movie really has all that much to say about the whole like Jewish identity or anti-Semitism or anything like that. It's just kind of dressing. I don't know.
Yeah, it doesn't. It really doesn't I don't know, like do as much. Like I kind of was in some ways reminded a little bit of Green Room, where it lets you know that Anton Yelchin's character in that movie is Jewish, but it's like a very sort of slight reference to it, and so like that is there, and so you can like point to it and say, oh, it's like making this sort of comment about identity or whatever, but it just like doesn't actually feel like it actively engages with that and like what the stakes in that situation are specifically for the one like Jewish character in that movie. And I feel sort of similarly with this, where it like doesn't fully, I feel like, let us know kind of like what the specific kind of stakes are for this character in coming like into conflict with the Nazis. So
I just want to say that's not Jesse Owens.
Oh, it's not?
Is it not?
Just gonna clear.
Oh fuck. Scratch this last 5 minutes
I
of
don't
the
know.
podcast.
Somebody please find out who the runner is. I just know it's not. It does not look like Jesse Owens, and that would seem like a very weird connection to make.
I don't know, man. It's hard to look for Marathon Man because it just pulls up like stuff about actual real life runners. So I'm like, I'm typing in like Marathon Man Jesse Owens, and it will just be like articles about
Hold on,
Jesse
I'm actually
Owens.
I'm gonna look up the actual opening credits.
But either way, it feels like the running is supposed to be some kind of metaphor, but it doesn't really do anything with that metaphor other than like present it as like, oh, he's running from something. What's he running from? I don't know. Yeah, I thought it was going to be much more about the like, I don't know, like, oh, he's like deep in the research, like losing touch with the world or something. Like, I don't know. I thought it was going to be more about like him being a student and researching and like finding something scary in his research. But no, not really. It's all like, oh, your brother knows some Nazis. How about that?
Can I? This is somewhat random. Can I just say that Laurence Olivier in this movie reminds me of Robin Williams in 1 Hour Photo?
I can see it. Hey,
by the way, I figured out who the runner is.
Uh-huh.
I'm going to pronounce his name badly. He's Ethiopian.
Uh-huh.
Abibi Bakila.
Oh.
That is him.
Okay.
It's from the film Tokyo Olympiad 1965.
Very interesting.
Yeah. In the 1960 marathon, running in the streets of Rome.
The more you know.
No connection to Nazis.
Any final thoughts before we wrap up on Marathon Man? Did you like it?
Not particularly. I thought it was like fine. Yeah, that's.
Anyways, to answer your question, I thought that it was fairly gripping as a thriller, and I was hoping it would kind of open itself up into some sort of broader meaning by the end of the film, and I kind of felt like it ended up minimizing itself as it went rather than opening itself up. But I definitely think that it's an interesting entry in like the 70s paranoia thriller genre. And I think that Dustin Hoffman and gosh, we've said his name a billion times and now I've forgotten it. Roy Scheider both give very good performances. So, I mean, I would recommend the film for people who are interested in this era or this type of film.
Roy Scheider, low-key sexy, just saying.
Yeah.
He's doing those like push-ups in his hotel. Like I was like, damn, Roy Scheider.
Yeah, those are some crazy push-ups.
I like it. Yeah, it was fine. I kind of agree with you, Andrew. Like it's, I don't know. It didn't like blow me away as this thriller, but I felt like it hit what it was trying to do pretty well, and I did very much enjoy him just like walking down the street in New York and them going, holy, is that Nazi war criminal who was the White Angel who was walking, people to their death at concentration camps? Oh my gosh, I'm just going to, my Fifth Avenue store and there's this Nazi. Yeah.
He reminded me of a Batman villain with his little sleeve knife.
Oh my gosh, it was great.
It was like the Penguin.
Well, that will wrap up this episode of Cinematary. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cinematary, on Twitter handle @Cinematary, and on Letterboxd at letterboxd.com/Cinematary. We post all of the movies that we talked about in this episode. Next week, we will be continuing our Listener's Choice series. You'll have to wait until the episode to figure out what we're going to be talking about. But, thank you to everybody who submitted stuff. We really appreciate it, and hopefully feel free to continue to, just send us stuff on how we're doing with the podcast, how you found it, all that good stuff. Any suggestions, that's always good. If you guys have series ideas, all that good stuff, please do that. Zach at cinematary.com. But until next week, thank you guys for listening. We'll see you then.